Black summer, it hasn't faded from the landscape or from our memories. New research shows 71% of Aussies want us to become a world leader on climate action, partly because 82% of us are concerned that climate change will make firestorms like these a more frequent feature of our lives.
What's really changed over the last decade is that felt experience when it comes to climate impacts. No more is this something for future generations to worry about. These impacts are being felt now.
68% of Aussies want our leaders to commit to a target of net zero by 2050, and so does Bojo. In a phone call with Scott Morrison Tuesday evening, the British PM stressed the need for bold action and ambitious targets to cut emissions to reach net zero. Somehow, though, that part didn't make it into the PMO's official account of the convo. Our PM brushed it off.
Our policies won't be set in the United Kingdom. They won't be set in any part of the world other than here.
In recent days, Japan, net zero emissions by 2050, South Korea, same target. The Morrison government is increasingly isolated when it comes to climate change.
While the political biff rages on, one of the big four banks has decided to rebrand as the good guys. Today, ANZ announced that it'll ask its customers to commit to a transition away from fossil fuels and towards net zero, and that it'll refuse new loans to high-emitting businesses. Naturally, they're getting it in the neck.
This is an outrageous and hypocritical stance from the ANZ. It is not the bank's job to try and save the planet.
You want to put more pressure on farmers? So you start having a sort of a moral police coming out from the bank to tell the farmers how to do their job? That sounds like a very bad idea for the Australian economy.
The economy versus climate argument's a familiar one, but with more and more Aussies taking the side of those moral police, is it time the government took their climate concerns seriously?
Well, Tim Buckley is an energy finance expert and he joins us now. Tim, is this climate leadership from ANZ or just good business?
I think it's a reflection of both. It's certainly very sensible business that any financial institution manage key financial risks, and climate change is the ultimate financial risk. ANZ is doing what the regulators, both globally and in Australia, APRA has been talking about it for the last 3 years. It's great to see climate leadership, business leadership by ANZ today.
So it sounds like a reasonably good business decision. Why do you think then that the government is so upset?
I think probably the best response I could give you to that is what the former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull called it. It's idiocy and ideology. There's no other word for it. I mean, it's climate science denialism at its worst. It's Australia being held back by climate science and fossil fuel vested interest groups who are effectively telling our federal government to try and hold back the tide. And it's an impossible task, but unfortunately they're trying.
Well, geez, get off the fence, Tim. I mean, seriously. This will, of course, or it looks like it will hurt fossil fuel exports, which is a big thing in the Australian economy. So I suppose the government would be concerned about that. Do you think the national interest would be better served by a more orderly transition to renewables?
Well, I would agree with your conclusion. Unfortunately, our federal government refuses to embrace that opportunity. It refuses to embrace the massive investment, trade and employment opportunities that decarbonisation offers for Australia. Instead, they would rather have a chaotic lack of policy and leave it to supposedly the market. All of Australia's major trading partners are committing to net zero. They're committing to action on climate change. Australia is being isolated as a world laggard.
There will, of course, nonetheless be Australian businesses that would be affected by the ANZ's decision today. I'm thinking especially of farmers, because agriculture is emissions intensive. Should we be worried about farmers who are unable to get finance now?
Ironically, rather than the federal government attacking ANZ for this, the federal government should be applauding. ANZ is talking about working with the farming community of Australia, just as the federal government's technology roadmap says soil sequestration of carbon is one of the top 5 technology opportunities in its technology roadmap of the future that Angus Taylor announced only a month ago.
Thanks so much for your time tonight, Tim. It's much appreciated.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
Wages are
growing at their slower, sustained pace.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.